Chapter 6, Lust. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you would lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. Matthew 5:27-30, English Standard Version. Screen protectors. It was an ear-splitting crash, one filled with the breaking of thin plastics, polyurethanes, glass, and metal. The crash came from Billy, who was hiding in the balcony with one of his friends, about to share a picture of his girlfriend, and that's when Jesus found them. The sound carried through the church and attracted a crowd, and the silence afterwards was deafening, as everyone's eyes fixed on Jesus, the same Jesus who had put a construction nail through Billy's brand new tablet with a very large and well-used framing hammer. What preceded this act of technological destruction was a brisk walk to Jesus' office to grab the tools of his trade. Jesus was a carpenter, after all. He knew what it meant to build things and to break them down. He grabbed a hammer and a nail that he was all too familiar with and walked with a single and unwavering purpose towards the recipient of Christie's sext from the chapter before. What on earth could have caused him to act so brashly towards the possessions of another person? And what could have been the reason for the outburst? All these and more were the questions that murmured their way through the crowd that was beginning to gather. You see, after a redemptive chat with Billy's girlfriend, Christy, the one who had been sending him the pictures of her body for him to lust after, Jesus went to the recipient of the sin and dealt with that problem too, to show him just how to flee temptation and resist the devil. So as the crowd started to gather, Jesus held up his hand for a moment of silence. After all, something expensive had just been killed, and got dangerously close to Billy's face to speak with him. Singled out, Billy's friend, who was enjoying the show, snuck away into the background, leaving Billy and Pastor Jesus to share the spotlight. We'll see him later because sin loves collateral damage. But Billy had thought his sin of lust was private, just like his browsing session. But porn is never private. It is always public. Pictures can be shared with anyone with eyes. And if you look at all the thousands of naked bodies, it's a crowd any way you swing it. It's only separated by a screen, now in pieces because of a god with a man complex. But a wedding bed is for two bodies that become one. So no matter how many promises were made of the privacy in the server, this electronic exchange of nudity where pictures can be shared, sinners always flock to sin in the auspice of privacy. And Billy committed the same sin Eve did when she took the knowledge of good and evil in its delicious fruity form for herself. His friend took the same fruit Adam did when he said he was made aware of that sin in memory of the shiny apple-bitten tablet that Billy viewed it on. So in hushed tones, so the onlookers wouldn't hear Jesus confront Billy's transgression, he stepped in to say, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your eyes than your whole body to be thrown into hell. I figured you prefer this," he said, pointing to the shattered mess of plastic and microchips, "to a spoon." And as the friend of Billy hid from God like his first father before him, and the crowd fell silent in realization of what was happening, Jesus did what he did best and dealt with sin. You see, a body was torn for this sin, and it was thrown into Hades, not just in judgment, but in rising victory also, that sin might not be toyed with on our phones, screens, and minds most of all. Working with Jesus would be interesting whenever we had to confront our sin. The approaches of secrecy and accountability groups or confidentiality and trust kind of fly out the window with a savior that suggests this kind of radical reaction. We want a 12-step program to ease us out of our sin that we actually do love, or else we wouldn't be doing it in the first place. But Jesus insists upon cold turkey. An approach that would leave us maimed and hurting, but whole in the eyes of God. With sin's cancer far removed, this is a man who stared down legions of demons in the face, a man who knew the dangers that possessed men who could bend iron chains with their bare hands brought to the table, and he dealt with the works of the devil, not the effects, not skirted, not counseled, not processed. He made war against sin and reigns ever victorious. Could it be that it's not that Jesus wants porn addicts to cut out their wandering eyes, but rather he's showing us that slicing out our sin isn't easier, but more personal to the sinner? It's not like Jesus set up an eye and hand removal service to supplement the church's income. He did teach us to sin no more, though, and I think that's the Jesus that we would see working as a youth pastor today. He'd be the one recklessly searching bags at dry grad and throwing MP3 players out the window of the bus on the way to retreats, teaching us to put to death our sin by drastic decapitation, because when you cut off something's head, it rarely can put up a fight, and when you nail sin to a cross, it stays dead. There would come a point where we would either have to refuse Jesus' instruction or refuse our possessions, our property, and our lives, because Jesus offers us all three and more if we seek his kingdom first. We refuse him now because he's not here beside us, beside our mouse pads and our usernames and our status updates and our blog posts. But this book has always been about what Jesus would do, and the nail through the tablet seems just about right. In the same way that he died for the sins of the law condemned by us, on stone tablets made much more rustic but still damning in the data that was on them, it wasn't the first time tablets have been broken for this kind of thing. But with conviction and conversion, it had the potential to be the last, at least for Billy anyways. That's why he said pluck your eye out and cut off your hand. Decapitate anything. A decapitated anything is just a newly dead piece of who you were, and you are what's left when the Savior is done with you. Because the piece that you cut off, you are not lost but rather found. Nailed to a Roman cross 2,000 years prior, when a timeless God knew you were going to sin like we all do every time, so he disconnected that sin from our lives the way Billy really needs to cancel his data plan. He crushed our iniquity as simply as the deleted sexts from Christie's phone. That was a tough chapter to write. It's something that most teenage guys deal with, is porn, and especially in now these days. Just the way that the world is progressing, it's getting worse and worse for guys. And I think that how Jesus would deal with that as a youth pastor is drastically different than how we see it now. And I sometimes wonder if that's a place for the church to grow. But I really wanted to highlight what Jesus did and try and translate that into modern day life so that we can see what that example at least looks like fictionally. So I hope you guys like the chapters, a couple more in the book, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon.